Well, the U.S. now shifting energy away from the Middle East to Asia Pacific. That's because that is where all the action is, apparently, with China's growing economy and expanding influence in the region. President Obama recently announced the plan to scale down the military budget, but part of that plan is zeroing in on Asia.
As I made clear in Australia, we will be strengthening our presence in the Asia Pacific, and budget reductions will not come at the expense of that critical region.
China and the U.S. now two of the biggest world economic powers, and we see somewhat of an arms race going down now with the two countries. The U.S. pumping billions into new weapons to deploy to the region. Here's a look at some of them. Well, this is a fighter jet Lockheed Martin is working on. It integrates advanced stealth technologies and sensor systems with supersonic speed. And then there is this. You're looking at a sketch of the most expensive piece of military equipment ever to be created, the first of the Navy's next generation of aircraft carriers, nearly 3 football fields long, weighs more than 100,000 tons, equipped with 2 cutting-edge nuclear reactors and defense missiles. So those are just a couple of the new toys the U.S. is getting ready to unveil, but they're not the only ones upping their arsenal. Let's take a look now what China has in the works. This is a J-20 stealth fighter jet, the first of its kind to be developed and tested by China. And this is the Dongfeng 21D. This land-based missile is able to hit an aircraft carrier as far as 2,000 miles offshore. Now, with all this new military equipment and this new military vision, is a battle of sorts emerging between the two world players. And could this be the beginning of a Cold War? Well, to dig deeper into this now, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, former Reagan administration official and economist and columnist, joins me now. Welcome, Paul. So we are shifting this military focus from the Middle East to the Asia Pacific. Why this shift in this global military strategy?
The United States is disturbed by the rapid economic rise of China and by the predictions that China will surpass the United States as the major economic power. You see, Washington has bought this neoconservative ideology of world hegemony. And so it wants to be able to prevent the rise of a challenging power. And that's what lies behind this. It also what lies behind Washington's war preparations against Iran.
And, you know, as the U.S., for the past decade, we've been kind of distracted, focusing our resources, time, effort in Iraq and Afghanistan, in the Middle East. So in that time, China has had time to expand their influence in the region. So is now the time that the U.S. is recognizing this and saying, hey, we need to do something about this?
Yes, they're directing their attention mainly against China's independent access to energy. That was what the United States organized NATO attack on Libya was about. It's blocked China from its oil investments in eastern Libya. Is what the United States Africa Command is about. It's to block China elsewhere in Africa, Nigeria, for example. And that's what the war preparations against Iran is about. China has very substantial energy investments in Iran and relies on Iranian oil for a considerable extent. And so what we see, in my opinion, is a replay of the American strategy against Japan that provoked the attack on Pearl Harbor. We want to prevent the Chinese economy from rising, to box it in by reducing or controlling its access to energy.
And we have Timothy Geithner. He is now in China discussing that exact topic, these sanctions that are in place now against Iran. I mean, how do you expect China to react to this?
Well, of course, I wouldn't expect China to shoot itself in the foot, and I don't know why Timothy Geithner or the United States government thinks China will cooperate in America's plans to deny China energy. It doesn't make any sense. And you see, China is not threatening anyone. all the threats are coming from the Americans.
Well, you know,
China doesn't have any war plans to attack the United States. And China is not claiming the Gulf of Mexico as an area of its national interest. So why are we claiming the South China Sea as something that's so important to America's interest? It's of no importance to America's interest.
I mean, yeah, it's interesting that you say that because obviously with this effort and this military presence being upped and the troops being deployed to areas around China, that, you know, that they are viewed as somewhat of a threat. Otherwise, they wouldn't be focusing so much attention to this region of the world. I mean, how much of a threat is China really to the U.S.?
It's not any threat. It's our biggest creditor. It's the biggest buyer of Washington's debt. It's a great financer. It's, you know, it's the host of numerous American global corporations. So it's not China that has this ideology of world hegemony. It's Washington. It all comes back to those neoconservatives. They've got a whole government following the notion that, oh, America must use its dominance before it loses it to establish hegemony over the world. That means we can't let any other country rise up. Well, this is a formula for war, but the impetus comes from Washington, not from China.
Wanted to talk a little bit more about this strategy of the United States. The U.S. is now increasing ties with China's neighbors, expanding bases around China. And I mean, from China's perspective, when you see this military buildup in Australia, increasing ties with the Philippines, how can we expect China to react to this?
Well, they'll react with a lot of caution. But you see, we're doing the same thing to Russia. So Russia and China are not Iraq and Afghanistan. They're two nuclear-armed countries. And so what Washington is doing now is driving the world toward a nuclear war. I don't expect China or Russia, for that matter, to simply acquiesce in American hegemony over them. And so the stakes that Washington is playing now are extremely high, and they're reckless. It's almost criminal insanity, in my opinion. And there's no reason for it. You know, it's not that China is going around attacking people or having war plans to attack people. It relies on its economic connections. There's no China command in Africa. They're there on an economic basis, but there is an American military command in Africa. And there's an American now military command, as you said, in Asia, trying to surround China. So it makes no sense, but it's a huge threat to everyone in the world.
And as you just said, this tension, this mounting tension, you say that it's paving the way for nuclear conflict. And earlier on we showed some examples of both the U.S. and China kind of increasing their arsenal of weapons. I mean, amid all this, could we see the seeds being planted for a new Cold War?
Yes, of course. You know, look, if one country has an ideology of hegemony over the world, then there's going to be at least a Cold War, if not a hot one.
Well, definitely a lot to look, or maybe not look forward to, but a lot of turmoil in the area, and everyone is keeping a close eye. Thank you so much for weighing in. That was former Reagan administration official and columnist Paul Craig Roberts.